Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Currett Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 1998 movie titled Out of Sight. Now, Out of Sight is a crime comedy that runs for 2 hours and 2 minutes long. It is directed by Steven Soderbergh, and it is produced by Danny DeVito and Barry Sonnenfeld. It is adapted from a novel by Elmore Leonard, who also wrote some other memorable films that was also adapted into films like Slick, 52 Pickup, and of course the Quentin Tarantino vehicle Jackie Brown. And the script was written by Scott Frank, the score was done by David Holmes, the cinematography by Elliot Davis, and the editing by Ann V. Coates. And it stars George Clooney, Jennifer Lopez, Ving Rhames, Don Cheadle, Steve Zahn, Albert Brooks, Isaiah Washington, and cameo appearances by Michael Keaton and Samuel L. Jackson. Now, Out of Sight stars George Clooney as a hard-working bank criminal who goes by the name of Jack Foley, along with the temptingly sexy U.S. Marshal played by Karen Sisco. They are placed in the back of a car truck after Foley makes his escape from a Florida prison. Once his escape, the thought has gone as planned. Foley is eventually hunted down by Sisco, while his accomplices, which includes his trustworthy assistant Buddy, played by Ving Rhames, and his not-so-reliable ally Glenn, played by Steve Zahn, work their ways to one of the more wealthier suburbs located in nearby Detroit. There they join forces with a suspicious business dealer named Ripley, played by Albert Brooks, who once sent him to jail on account of uncut diamonds found in his home. A dangerous assassin named Maurice Miller, played by Don Cheadle, has plans to invade Ripley's mansion, accompanied by his posse, which includes Kenny, played by Isaiah Washington, and White Boy Bob, played by Keith Lonecker. While this is happening, Foley and Sisco start to get comfortable with each other in a Detroit hotel where their romance is put to the test, which concludes in a showdown as Foley enters Ripley's estate, which contributes to the fun that they were having together. So the question is, are they in love, or is Sisco just pursuing to have him arrested? That is the question. I mean, sure, they eventually become romantically linked, but however, they are both on the opposite ends of the law. While one is a hardened U.S. federal marshal, and the other is a petty crook. You often wonder, do opposites really attract? You'll have to tune in to see. The first thing that caught my eye when watching Out of Sight was that it was very cool. But cool can be very hard to evaluate. Now, I've been around movies practically all my life, and there have been some equally proportioned coolness. I've seen some pretty good movies that I could describe as cool, and there are also some very bad movies, but they still succeed in remaining cool. So in many ways, Steven Soderbergh has captured the coolness of his film as a reminiscing of the old 1960s espionage heist films that had run rampant in that time period. The cat games seem to make it very obvious. For a film to succeed in being cool, you need to convey manipulative tactics to your audience and to make them think that this movie truly defines cool so they can demand for more. And by the time the movie makes it to Detroit, the cool factor really starts to kick in, and that was when I really started to get into the film. In this movie, we can all appreciate the cool things about it, but the more specific definition of the cool factor of this movie is the sexiness it brought to the screen, and that both genders can really pander about. I think that we all know by now that J-Lo is really not that great of an actress. At best, she can come across as an average performer. It may not help that, her career choices over the years have not always been that kind to her. Made in Manhattan, please. But in Out of Sight, I'll let that blind squirrel find his nut. In other words, she actually was pretty good here. And that's mainly because Mr. Soderbergh knew that at best Miss Lopez can excel if she doesn't really do very much on screen. In reality, it's the camera work that's the real star here, and it gives J-Lo the chance to reveal her sumptuous physique without really having to do much of anything else. Now, on the contrary, George Clooney is a very capable and a much more competent performer than J-Lo, and his camera work excels better because he could still convey sex appeal to the female audience, while at the same time he could back it up with versatile acting. And instead, he can take more charge to the camera than J-Lo, and he never lets the camera run his game. So his combination of suave and talent embodies the dynamic of Clooney's repertoire. That sure, he's considered a hunk, but he's not just some one-dimensional piece of man-meat. He actually does know how to perform, and he knows how to complement the camera as well as the camera complementing him. Now, in most films, cool and suave would surely not churn out a film that is real. But much to my surprise, Out of Sight actually has a believable story nailed into the suave and sex appeal behind, and it's never upstaged by it. Sure, there are some implausible scenes that are a bit far-fetched, like the climactic heist near the end of the film, but the characters succeed in keeping it real, and the situations they face give us that impression as the film progresses. The great chemistry between J-Lo and Clooney comes alive, and we get to feel for them all the way through the film, even though they're from the opposite sides of the law. Hey, they come together like opposites attract, as a taken from a quote from Paula Abdul. And it's not just the Clooney-Lopez show. The supporting performers are also very convincing, including Ving Rhames as Clooney's trusted accomplice, Steve Zahn as his screw-up assistant, and Albert Brooks coming across as the rich, nerdy guy. Behind this heist film, there are truly lots of very believable scenes, and that definitely deserves a plus in my favor. The camera work was really put together quite elegantly, where the rural and the urban settings really cooperate quite nicely. We get to know where the more colorful, vibrant settings are. It might be a little bit of spoon feeding, but I do make it feel like, it does make it feel like we know which settings is what. I mean, we have Miami, Florida looking very vibrant and colorful and just full of energy and life. And then you go to the mean streets of Detroit, Michigan, which has a more darker dominating the streets, with the exception of the cold bluish tint in the background. And for the cool factor comes into play with the impression that Mr. Soderbergh chose style over substance in this movie. And I don't think he accidentally decided to make this film more stylistically than substantially. The style definitely does outweigh the substance. And for a movie like this, that is not exactly a bad thing. I mean, in most spy thrillers, style will always upstate substance. That'll never change. It hasn't changed in the 60s with the James Bond movies and the Dirty Harry or the other crime dramas that manifested the TV screens in the 60s, the 70s, and even well into the 80s. You know, Heart to Heart, Cagney and Lacey, Matt Houston, etc. Style in those kind of movies will definitely always outweigh the substance. I also kind of liked the idea that for a crime action thriller, the action scenes are, yes, a bit unpleasant and graphic, but there's not really that much action going for the movie. And that's not a bad thing again either, because at least it gives a little more opening towards the characters, and the motives done by the characters are not just, you know, one-dimensionally dismissed, that they're just going out to kick ass. And I also liked the character of Jack Foley, George Clooney's Jack Foley, being the sense that he's not the stereotypical hardened criminal. He's not a hardened criminal at all. When he does his heists, he doesn't use ruthless aggression like guns or just sheer semi-primitive instincts to break into banks. He uses manipulative mind games, witty humor, words of persuasion. You know, he gives people this impression that, you know, he's just an average guy going into a bank without realizing that he is a criminal. And even though he's not exactly the most competent criminal, you know, he seems to come in and out of jail. When he tries to break out of jail, he doesn't use too much aggression to get out. I mean, he's just cooler than a cucumber. And it doesn't, and you know how usually a lot of criminals seem like they often, you know, whine and complain about, you know, that they did this on account of a bad childhood or whatnot. I don't think Jack Foley ever came from a bad childhood, and the reason why he turned his life to crime was because, I guess in his world, it was probably the only thing he knew how to do. But it plays to effect. So let's see, if I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, I would definitely give it a 7.5. Okay, this movie is not going to win any Oscars. In fact, in 1998, when it was released, it bombed at the box office. I guess people wanted to see, you know, quick chases, explosives, high-flying action, buildings bombed, property damage, shootouts, deaths, body counts, because that's what you probably would expect to see in crime caper films or heist films. But you don't get that too much in this movie. It does happen in this movie, yes, but it's not a frequent thing. There is a lot of development in character, there's a lot of drama too, and also much needed humor. It was also implemented in this movie, so this movie does have a lot to offer. So I guess this kind of ends my writer review. I thank you all for listening in. If you want to, you can subscribe to my channel, and you can write back to me. Remember, be kind, be courteous, and I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Correct Writer saying, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.